Richard and I'm an addict. Because this is what will fuck you up. Everybody that has relapsed, everybody, I've been through around 30 years, everybody that has relapsed is because they've been dishonest. And usually they use when they get discovered. And the shame hits them, the guilt hits them, and then we go, oh fuck. Yeah? This one, the most important spiritual principle in your life. I still get excited by helping people change their life. So it's nice to go back on the tools, so as to speak, you know, and I they might be different faces, but they're the same faces I've seen for 30 years. And what I do is I do what I love. I do what I feel great about doing. So because I love it, I do it well.
I was broken. When I turned up to NA, I was a really scared person. That presented as an angry person. You know, I walked in as a skinhead from, you know, the 80s and 90s, you know, and but how I was presenting, the wall that I put up, people would just stay away from it. They would cross the street when they saw me coming. You know, Richard was one of the few people in the early stages that saw through that, you know, and he come up to me and all he actually said to me that first time, he didn't hit me with recovery and this is what you need to do or that's what you need to do. All he come up and said was, "You knew, aren't you, mate?" And what that meant to me was someone's finally seen me, you know, and that stuck with me, you know, and our relationship's grown from that point, you know. So he gave me my first opportunity to feel welcomed in NA, and I'm forever grateful for that.
I got to about 17 and I was using $500 worth a day. I was on the streets. It was horrible. I came in so damaged. I came in so broken. There was so much fear. If you sat with me, you could feel the fear it was radiating out of my body. He's ahead of his time. He has got wisdom. He's able to see kind of what recovery needs. So his passion is recovery. That's his whole world. He's the one that is the kind of the one that lights the way.
I made a conscious decision to become a drug dealer. I became a heroin dealer, and then I became a heroin smuggler. You know, so it was the sort of natural progression. But it was always kind of like a business edge, I thought. I didn't see it as being wrong either. But, you know, using domestic flights, strapping on heroin into your body, you know. And then usually not that much more than a kilo because you look too fat, you know. And I didn't want it because I was skinny. I was a skinny little junkie, you know, and so I could put a bit on and get through. I've got with a crew of people. We're using smack, so we needed to make money, and we decided to do an armoured car. The armoured car was at the Philip Morris cigarette factory. So it had, back in those days they paid cash to all the employees. So what we were doing, we were going to rob the payroll. And there was a guy that I really didn't know that was in the crew, and he was in Kiwi, you know, I kind of have a bit of a funny thing with Kiwis, and he shot someone in the knee, in the leg, and of course, when that happens, the police want to find you. You know, they've got limited resources, so there's lots of robberies, but when they become armed, they become violent, they put all their resources into it. We got busted. He got busted, and then he gave us all up. I ended up getting sentenced to 8 with 5 on the bottom, off to Pentridge. So I got out of jail, my time served, I had parole, but no debt, right? So I've got a good opportunity to start life again. But I woke up the following morning, a smashed flagon of red wine, fits all over the floor, you know, I've had a whack, and I'm unconscious. I come to on the floor of a flat, like, where am I? So that was my good intention of not using a drug after prison. The dark times is when I had no drugs, sitting at home, in my bedroom, on my own, detoxing, feeling miserable, feeling sick, lonely. That's hell. Being on your own, and whether it's on the banks of Merry Creek or in your penthouse, that's hell. So I remember that horrible feeling of just desperation. Nothing, like I was actually probably going to die from exposure because I was living rough, I was living out. And I went back to my mum's. I had nothing left, and I thought, well, I'll go back to mum's. Because my pride wouldn't let me go and admit to anybody that I'm fucked. I need help. And, I went home to my mum, and she actually didn't recognise me. I knocked on the door of 40 Lloyd Street, where I lived all of my life, and she looked through and didn't recognise me and thought, yes, what can I do for you? And I said, Mum, it's me. And she just went, Richard, open the door, come in. And the first thing she did was stick me in the bath, because I was probably a bit on the nose and very dirty. I had that Rastafarian hairstyle. I hadn't washed my hair for months, and I had piss and shit in my pants. So it was a pretty, probably frightening thing for my mother, to see that my addiction had taken me to that low. And I only got that low because of my ego. I wasn't going to say I couldn't fix this. I ended up not being able to use heroin because, for whatever reason, I didn't want to do the crime anymore. I'd lost my dash. So I became your garden variety alcoholic. And when I became that alcoholic, it was very, very sad. I remember in the last week that I was scrounging around trying to find pennies to buy, either booze or cigarettes. And I sat down in front of this locum psychiatrist. He was an old guy, he was in his 70s. He had little bifocal lenses and chain smoked. And I sat there, and he had my file, which was huge, because I've been seeing this guy for 6 years. And he spent quite a bit of time reading through the file and every now and then looking over the top of his glasses at me. And he just stopped and closed the file, and he looked over the top of his glasses and he said, well, you've tried everything, haven't you, son? And I said, yeah, I have. And he said, well, look, I think all that's left for you is probably Alcoholics Anonymous. And then I turned around and I said, mate, I've been there. I've tried that. It doesn't work. And then he looked up again over the top of his glasses. He said, well, it's either AA or Amen. And that was it. I haven't had a drink since, or a drug. I got on my knees in the psychiatric hospital. I was in the seclusion room, or the rubber room, whatever you want, padded cell, whatever you want to call it. And I got on my knees and prayed for help. And it's been there ever since. I had an experience in that cell at that time. I had what they call a white light experience. I thought I was dying. But, it was really a conversation with God. And I've never looked back. So when people ask me, do I believe in God? I say, no. I know God exists. There's a force, there's an energy in this world, and I think all religions in some way try to connect to that. So for me, God is a life force. Religion is for those who are scared of going to hell. And spirituality is for those who have been to hell and don't want to go back.
I met Richard in 1972. We were both 17 years old, and I met him in an inner urban hippie community. Well, I re-met Richard in 1986. And he was at that point just getting into setting up a drug. It was the US Society. It was a small service set up by ex-users, and it was in Chapel Street in Windsor. And the plan was to offer safe support accommodation for people in recovery. So he tussled with that committee of management and he won. He left the legacy of a program that was around drug-free living, including alcohol-free, and it certainly was a not-for-profit, and Shark continues to be a not-for-profit. So there's no doubt about it that Richard spent probably his formative years in the drug and alcohol sector in the not-for-profit programs. You know, Richard had a crucial role in the setting up of drug-free support accommodation here in Melbourne. Absolutely crucial. And certainly, you know, if we talk about Richard's force of personality, he has the capacity to really bring people along with him. And to be that, you've got to be able to invite people into your dream and make it come alive for them. So you've got to have really good communication skills, which Richard has. You've got to have drive, which Richard has. You've got to have charisma, which Richard has. And you've got to be prepared to take a risk. And he's got heaps of that.
So at the very beginning in rehab, you're just doing the physical. Then the psychological. It takes about a year for us to psychologically learn new behaviour. And the social aspect of recovery is ongoing. Because we're social animals, we need to have, you know, that social contact. And for us, you know, I don't know about you, but when I was using, I hung around people who had good dope. Yeah? So it's pretty obvious, if you want to have good recovery, when you're in recovery, you hang around people who've got good recovery. You know, that have the bits and pieces that you like, or the spirituality that you like. So what I did was I set up something where I refused to even let government be involved. So I was able to develop a program that actually worked.
I mean, I've seen Richard work with addicts over many, many years on all sorts of levels, and particularly in a clinical setting. And one thing that I've always admired about Richard is his ability to see through all of the stories and to get straight to the nub of the problem. And I think it's probably because of a long association with addicts in a clinical setting that he can really see what the problem is and has an understanding of perhaps some of the solutions that that person might need at that time. One thing I can tell you about Richard is I know that he's a trailblazer. He's always been at the forefront of where, and agitating for where the problems are. He has a strong insight into what some of the areas that require change and how you might go about it. And so I think my experience with Richard over the years is that he's in there, he does understand it, he has a good working knowledge of what's out there and what works. Look, there's no question in my mind that the work that Richard does, the vision that he's had and the determination that he's got in helping other people has saved a lot of lives. Without his ability to understand addicts and set up treatment for them, there'd be a lot of people that wouldn't probably be alive today. I couldn't tell you how many, but I know it's a lot. Richard's a unique individual. He has a lot of characteristics that make the idea of recovery a possibility, and I think he is a visionary, and I think he has a unique understanding of the addict's mind. And coming from his own experience, putting that together in a clinical setting, given his personality, he's somebody, a bit of a visionary, and I'm sure that people are drawn to his vision and the possibility that the world can be a better place for addicts.
Having experienced the drug scene in every aspect, right, from, you know, a user to a dealer to a smuggler to a, you know, an armed robber, and now, you know, having studied behavioural science and social science, you know, that gives me a unique insight into the machinations of the whole thing. I've now seen about 15,000 people, including families. Out of them, if we know through our clinical audits that we have a very high success rate in people staying drug-free for at least a year longer, right? We know it's 80%. So if I was to say 50% of the people that meet me, come through my program, stay well, that's 7,500 people. That's a fucking lot. And I feel a bit emotional when it affects me. I think I've saved a lot of people's lives.
I stopped. Richard put his hand out to me and started describing the disease concept and what I was going through and why I felt the feelings that I did. And I was really blown away by this guy. You know, I honestly believe that without meeting Richard Smith all those years ago, those decades ago in the 90s, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now. I've never met a man with so much to give back, who's gone through so much in his own life, who understands the disease, understands addiction, and has put, has given his life to this to save other people, and he has. I owe him everything, really. I owe him my life. I'm truly indebted to Richard. He's an incredible guy.
Now, someone said to me the other day, what's the difference between 30 days and 30 years? And I said, shit, I'm a lot older. Some days I can be as insane as I was when I was 1 day clean, Recovery is about progression. Recovery is about actually, putting distance between yourself and the last drug. My favourite saying is, don't pick up under any circumstance. Even if your arse falls off, pick it up, put it in a wheelbarrow and take it to a meeting. And that's what I've done for 30 years. 1 day at a time, I've taken this poor sorry arse to a meeting. I've been around a long time, so if you have a look at it, I've been in the drug scene now for 45 years. And I've seen all sorts of policies, all sorts of treatment modalities, and now I've lived and seen a hell of a lot more. I think, I'm certainly in a good position to be able to give some advice on what works and what doesn't work, at a policy level down to a treatment level. And, we've got lots of great examples now around the world on what should be done. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. What I'd like to do now for the community is give back at a I suppose, a higher level. For me, it would be to try and achieve change from above. I've been trying to create change from below. So, I think the next phase for me in life is to look at working with influential people in government or influential people in think tanks,
I think his experience, together with his qualifications, put him in a good place to agitate for change. His understanding of what's needed and some of the innovative ways that could possibly be considered, he should be listened to.
2 words that describe Richard for me, and that's compassion and integrity.
Richard Smith is he's brash, he's controversial, he's enigmatic in a lot of ways. He's really likeable and really warm.
And I usually end it by saying, who loves you the most? God. Strength is serenity. To accept things I cannot change. Courage change the things I can. And wisdom has made a difference. Thanks for sharing and keep coming back. You're working. From dealer to healer is what a lot of people are, and I like that, from dealer to healer. For me, it's been an interesting life.